The sky over Gotham tore open like a wound in reality itself. Lightning, not the yellow crackling energy of Shazam's magic, but the raw azure fury of Asgardian storms, split the perpetual twilight that had settled over the city since the regime took power. Through the rift, two figures fell, gods from dying worlds pulled into a universe that had already learned the terrible lesson of what happens when divinity loses its way. Kratos hit the rooftop of old Gotham's abandoned district with enough force to crater concrete, the Leviathan axe frost-rhyming the impact zone. His ashen skin, marked with the red tattoo of his Spartan past, stood out against the Gotham gloom. Beside him, Thor landed with Mjolnir raised, eyes crackling with lightning as the Asgardian assessed this strange new battlefield. Two gods, two universes, one terrible realization. This world reeked of divine authority twisted into something dark. "Where?" Thor began, but Kratos was already moving, warrior instincts detecting the approach before sound betrayed it. The Spartan rage didn't flare, not yet, but his grip on the Leviathan axe tightened as armored figures descended from the sky. Superman's regime enforcers, the yellow S emblazoned on their chests, advanced with the confidence of those who served an unchallengeable god. "Unidentified metahumans," the lead enforcer announced, his voice amplified through helmet speakers. "You've entered regime-controlled territory. Stand down for processing, or face—" The warning died as Wonder Woman herself descended, her armor darker than the Diana prints of other timelines, the gold tarnished by compromise. She studied the two gods with a warrior's eye, seeing immediately what the enforcers could not. These were not metahumans. These were gods, and gods recognized their own. "Amazonian," Kratos rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of centuries and the death of pantheons. "I know your kind, warriors who serve. Tell me, who commands you?" Diana's hand rested on her sword hilt. "Superman, the man of steel. He brought peace to this world after it tore itself apart. If you're here to disrupt that peace—" "Peace?" Thor's laugh was bitter, Mjolnir spinning in his grip. "I've seen peace enforced by tyrants before. Loki wore that crown once. It did not end well for him." The lightning intensified around the Thunderer, storm clouds gathering despite Gotham's weather control systems. "This world feels wrong, like the air before Ragnarok." The regime enforcers moved to flank, but Wonder Woman raised her hand, halting them. Her eyes narrowed, tactical mind working. "You're not from this Earth. The dimensional breach, we detected it. You're refugees." A pause, then carefully, "or weapons sent by the Insurgency." "We serve no one," Kratos stated flatly. "We are here because reality itself fractured. But I would know, what is this peace you speak of, and what price did your Superman demand for it?" Before Diana could answer, the air pressure changed. Not the boom tube signature of apocalypse technology, but something more fundamental. The displacement of atmosphere by something moving faster than sound, faster than thought. Superman arrived, cape billowing in winds that obeyed his presence, and Kratos felt it immediately. This was power, true power. The kind that had toppled Olympus, that had brought gods to their knees. But there was something else beneath the raw force, something brittle and sharp, like a blade that had cut too deep and could no longer be sheathed. "Stand down, Diana," Superman said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority. His eyes, glowing faintly red, swept over Kratos and Thor with a clinical assessment of someone who had learned to see every living being as either ally or threat. Dimensional travelers, Asgardian based on the lightning signature, and you, his gaze fixed on Kratos, and for a moment something flickered in those eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or memory. You carry the weight of someone who's been killed before, killed a lot. I have killed gods, Kratos replied evenly, meeting Superman's gaze without flinching. The Leviathan axe pulsed with cold, frost spreading across the rooftop. Pantheons have fallen to these hands. If you seek to rule through fear, Kryptonian, know that I have toppled greater tyrants than you. The temperature dropped as Superman's heat vision flickered, the red glow intensifying. Around them, the regime enforcers tensed, hands moving to weapons. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir raised, lightning arcing between the hammer and the storm clouds above. Two gods facing a third, and Gotham held its breath. Then Superman smiled. It wasn't the warm, reassuring smile that once graced magazine covers and inspired hope across the globe. This was something colder, more calculated. You've killed gods. Good. Then you understand the burden of power, the responsibility that comes with being able to reshape the world. He gestured to the city below, to Gotham's streets where regime patrols maintained perfect order, where crime had been crushed beneath an iron fist wrapped in a red cape. This world was chaos. Heroes played games with villains, letting them escape, letting them kill again and again. I stopped that. No more jokers, no more senseless death, just peace. Through subjugation, Thor countered, and his voice carried the thunder of Asgard's storms. I've walked this path, Superman. I was once arrogant, believing my power gave me the right to dictate to lesser beings. My father taught me wisdom through exile. What taught you tyranny? For the first time, something genuine flickered across Superman's face. Pain, raw and ancient, the wound that had never healed. The Joker taught me. He tricked me into killing my wife, my unborn child. He made me destroy Metropolis with my own hands. And Batman, the name dripped with venom, Batman would have let him live, would have put him in Arkham again, to escape again, to kill again. So I made sure he couldn't. I made sure none of them could.
Kratos understood. The Ghost of Sparta, who had murdered his own family in blind rage manipulated by Ares, recognized the anguish beneath Superman's absolute conviction. This was a god broken by grief, warped by loss into something that wore justice like armor, but had forgotten what justice truly meant. "And now you rule," Kratos observed, "a god-king over mortals. Tell me, Superman, how many have you killed to maintain this peace?" The silence stretched. Diana shifted uncomfortably. The enforcers wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, and Superman's jaw tightened, the only tell in an otherwise perfectly controlled expression. "As many as necessary," he finally answered. "No more, no less. The question is, will you accept this world's peace, or will you side with terrorists who would rather see chaos return than accept order?" His eyes locked onto both gods, heat vision dancing behind the irises. "Because if you're here to cause problems, I'll handle you the same way I've handled every other threat to global stability, permanently." Thor's grip on Mjolnir whitened. Kratos felt the familiar burn of Spartan rage building in his chest, the urge to meet this challenge with violence as he had met every god who had stood in his way. But something made him pause, a memory of Atreus, of learning to master rage rather than be mastered by it. This Superman was dangerous not because of his power, but because he believed his tyranny was righteous. "We will see your world," Kratos decided, lowering his axe fractionally. "We will judge for ourselves what you have built, Kryptonian. But know this, If your peace is built on the corpses of those who dared speak against you, then you are no different than Zeus, than Odin in his darkest hour, and I have killed gods for far less." Superman studied them for a long moment, tactical mind calculating threat levels, contingencies, outcomes. Then he nodded slowly. "Fine. Diana, take them to the watchtower. Show them what we've accomplished. Let them see the truth with their own eyes." He rose into the air, capes spreading like dark wings. "But understand, I've fought Darkseid, Doomsday, and gods from Apocalypse. If you become a problem, I won't hesitate." As Superman vanished into the sky, faster than thought, Wonder Woman approached cautiously. "Come with me. See what we've built before you judge us. We're not monsters. We're heroes who finally did what was necessary." Kratos and Thor exchanged glances, a silent communication between warriors who had both learned the cost of absolute power. They would see this world's truth. They would understand what Superman's regime truly represented. And then, perhaps, they would decide whether this fallen god could be redeemed or needed to be stopped. In the shadows of old Gotham, where regime patrols never ventured, a figure watched through high-powered lenses. Batman's face, older and harder than in other timelines, showed no emotion as he logged the dimensional breach, the arrival of two new players in the endless war between order and freedom. The Insurgency would need to act fast, because if Superman recruited these gods to his cause, the regime would become truly unstoppable. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want them to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. The game had changed. Two gods from shattered worlds now walked the injustice timeline, and their choice would determine whether Superman's tyranny would finally fall or be cemented forever beneath divine authority that even Batman's Insurgency couldn't challenge. The Watchtower hung in orbit like a monument to Superman's absolute authority. Its sleek architecture no longer the hopeful symbol of heroes united, but rather the throne room of a god who had decided humanity needed salvation, whether it wanted it or not. As the teleporter materialized Kratos, Thor, and Wonder Woman in the main hall, the Asgardians' eyes immediately cataloged the changes. Automated defense systems tracking their every movement, regime soldiers stationed at every corridor, and surveillance feeds displaying a world under constant watch. "Welcome to perfect order," a voice drawled from the shadows, and Flash stepped into view. Barry Allen moved differently now, his optimism corroded by years of compromise, the scarlet suit darker in this timeline. No crime, no war. No one is stepping out of line because Big Blue's watching everything, everywhere, all at once. It's paradise, if you don't think too hard about how we got here. "Barry," warned Diana, her tone sharp, but the speedster just shrugged, vibrating slightly as if even standing still caused him physical discomfort. Thor studied the speedster with interest, recognizing the lightning that danced around him, different from Mjolnir's fury, but elemental nonetheless. "You serve this Superman, yet your words carry doubt. Why remain if you question his methods?" "Because the alternative is worse," Flash replied, but his eyes wouldn't meet Thor's. "You didn't see what the world was like before. The Joker nuked Metropolis, 11 million dead because Batman wouldn't—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Superman stopped it. He stops all of it now. And yeah, maybe his methods are harsh, but no one's nuking cities anymore." Kratos moved to the observation window, staring down at Earth below. His enhanced vision picked out the details, cities running with mechanical efficiency, patrol routes covering every major population center, and everywhere the S-shield displayed like a brand marking Superman's territory. It reminded him of Olympus at its height, when Zeus ruled through fear disguised as benevolence, when gods dictated mortal fate without question or mercy. "I have seen this before," the Ghost of Sparta rumbled.
Gods who claim to protect while they dominate. It always ends the same way, in blood and ash and the corpses of those who dared to dream of freedom. Freedom? Superman's voice carried from the command center, and the Man of Steel emerged, flanked by Cyborg, whose body language showed military precision rather than the uncertain youth of other timelines. Is that what you call the chaos that killed my family? The freedom for the Joker to trick me into murdering Lois and our unborn child? His eyes blazed, but he held the rage in check, barely. I gave humanity freedom for years. They used it to create monsters, to enable killers, to let the same villains escape and murder over and over while we played hero. Cyborg's cybernetic eye tracked Kratos and Thor continuously, analyzing, cataloging threats. Dimensional signatures stable, power levels. He paused, recalibrating. Power levels comparable to Kryptonian baseline. These two could threaten the regime if they chose to. Then let's make sure they choose correctly, Superman replied, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, almost like the hero he'd once been. He approached the two gods, cape billowing despite the lack of wind. I'm not a tyrant. I'm a protector who finally stopped pulling punches. Come, let me show you what real peace looks like. The holographic display activated, showing statistics that would have impressed even Heimdall's all-seeing gaze. Crime rates are at historic lows across every monitored zone. Disease eradication programs are running ahead of schedule. Food distribution networks ensure no one starves. Infrastructure was rebuilt and maintained with efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. Superman's regime had transformed Earth into something resembling paradise, if one ignored how that paradise was maintained. Impressive numbers, Thor admitted, though his tone remained guarded. But I've learned that what matters is not just the outcome, but the path taken to achieve it. Asgard once conquered the 9 realms, bringing peace through superior force. My father eventually learned that true peace cannot be imposed. It must be chosen. Your father was weak, Superman countered, and there was something hungry in his eyes now, something that had been waiting beneath the surface. He had the power to prevent suffering and didn't use it. How many died because of his restraint? How many worlds burned while he deliberated and philosophized? He stepped closer, and even gods felt the weight of the Kryptonian presence. I won't make that mistake. Every second I hesitate, someone might die. So I don't hesitate anymore. Kratos turned from the window, the Leviathan axe appearing in his hand with a thought, frost spreading across the deck. You speak of preventing death while building your peace on corpses. How many dissenters have you silenced, Superman? How many who refuse to kneel? The temperature in the watchtower dropped as Superman's heat vision flared, red light casting demonic shadows across his face. Flash tensed, ready to evacuate the area. Cyborg's weapon systems primed. Diana's hand moved to her sword. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, and 2 pantheons worth of godly power would tear the watchtower apart. Then Superman smiled, and somehow that was worse than his anger. You want to see? Fine. Victor, show them the Arkham footage. The holographic display shifted, and suddenly they were watching Arkham Asylum in the early days of the regime. The Joker's cell empty now, his final laugh still echoing in memory. Then scene after scene of other inmates, Zsasz, Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, Two-Face. Superman's methods displayed in clinical detail. No torture, no drawn-out executions, just swift, absolute justice, delivered by hands that could crack planets. Inmates who had killed dozens, hundreds, thousands, ended permanently by a God who had finally decided enough was enough.
These monsters had their chance, Superman stated flatly. Batman gave them chance after chance. The courts gave them trials. Arkham's revolving door gave them opportunities to escape and kill again. I gave them justice, final justice. His eyes were fixed on Kratos. You've killed gods, Spartan. Tell me, was Zeus worth saving? Was Ares? Or did they need to die for the world to be better?
The question struck deeper than any blade. Kratos remembered Olympus burning, remembered the satisfaction of driving his blades through divine flesh, remembered believing that killing the gods would free humanity from tyranny. But he also remembered the aftermath. Greece drowned, civilization collapsed, chaos unleashed because he hadn't considered what came after vengeance. I killed them in rage, Kratos admitted, his voice carrying the weight of old sins. And the world nearly died for my fury. I learned too late that destroying tyrants does not guarantee freedom, only a vacuum that greater evils rush to fill. Then help me prevent that vacuum, Superman pressed, sensing an opening. You understand the burden of power. You know what it costs to make the hard choices. Join the regime. Use your strength to ensure peace lasts. Together, we could protect not just Earth, but perhaps restore your own worlds. The technology here, the Phantom Zone, Motherbox integration, dimensional science, we could find a way to send you home, fixed, healed. Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened. The offer was tempting. Asgard destroyed in Ragnarok, his people scattered or dead. The chance to undo it all dangled before him like forbidden fruit. But he had learned wisdom through loss, had earned the right to wield Mjolnir again by understanding that power without restraint was simply another form of tyranny. You offer us everything we've lost in exchange for helping you rule. But answer me this, Superman. What happens to those who disagree with your methods? What becomes of free will in your perfect world? They're handled. Jealous interjected, and his voice carried a hollowness that spoke volumes. Peacefully when possible, firmly when necessary. The regime doesn't torture, doesn't make examples, just removes obstacles to order. Removes, Kratos repeated, the word tasting of ash and old blood. You mean kills. You sanitize murder with bureaucratic language, but I know the stench of state-sanctioned slaughter. I waded through rivers of it in Sparta's name. Superman's expression hardened. I won't apologize for protecting my world. You're free to judge, but you don't know what we endured. You didn't watch Metropolis burn, didn't hold your wife's corpse and know you were the weapon that killed her. Didn't see Batman refuse to end the Joker even after. His voice cracked just for an instant, the wound beneath the armor showing through. I did what had to be done, what I should have done years ago. And Batman, Thor asked quietly, I sense a great conflict in your words. Where is the Dark Knight in this new order? The silence that followed was damning. Diana looked away. Flash's vibrations increased. Cyborg's human eye closed briefly, and Superman's face became a mask of barely controlled rage. Batman leads terrorists, Superman said, each word precise and sharp. The Insurgency. They sabotage infrastructure, free criminals we've imprisoned, and spread propaganda claiming the regime is evil. Bruce would rather see the world burn than admit I was right, that his no-killing rule enabled every death that could have been prevented. Kratos studied Superman with the experienced eye of someone who had watched gods descend into madness. He saw Ares in the rigid shoulders, Zeus in the absolute certainty, and himself
His old self, the Ghost of Sparta, consumed by rage, in the way Superman couldn't speak Batman's name without fury bleeding through. You haven't killed him, this Batman. You've killed gods from Apocalypse, executed criminals without hesitation, but your former friend still lives. Why? The question hung in the air like Mjolnir before a strike. Superman's jaw worked, emotions warring across his face, love and hate, hope and despair, the last shred of the hero he'd been fighting against the tyrant he'd become. "I'm not a monster," Superman whispered, and for a moment he sounded lost, almost human. "Because some part of me still remembers when we were brothers, when we stood together against the darkness, when I believed in his way." Then his spine straightened, the moment of weakness passing. "But that doesn't mean I'll tolerate his interference. The insurgency will be stopped. Order will be maintained, with or without Batman's blessing." "Then you give us much to consider," Thor declared, Mjolnir resting across his shoulders. "But know this. I have seen the 9 realms groan under absolute rule. I have watched Odin's heavy hand create resentment that festered into rebellion. Peace enforced through fear is no peace at all, merely silence before the storm." Superman's eyes narrowed. "Is that your decision, then? You side with chaos over order?" "We side with nothing yet," Kratos interjected, stepping between the two gods before lightning and heat vision could fly. "You have shown us your truth, Superman. Now we would hear the other side. This Batman and his insurgency, what is their vision? Or are they simply rebels without alternative?" "They're terrorists," Cyborg stated flatly. "They'll tell you pretty lies about freedom and choice, but what they really want is the old world back, the world where the Joker could kill 11 million and Batman would still refuse to—" "Enough," Superman commanded, and the word carried the force of divine mandate. He studied Kratos and Thor for a long moment, clearly weighing options, calculating outcomes. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Fine. Diana, take them to Batman if they insist. Let them hear his excuses, his justifications for enabling mass murder through inaction. Let them see the truth, that the insurgency offers nothing but a return to the chaos that destroyed everything I loved." He turned away, cape sweeping dramatically. "But when you've heard both sides, you'll make a choice. Everyone does eventually. There's no neutral ground in war. You stand with order, or you stand with those who would tear it down. Choose carefully, gods, because if you choose wrong, even dimensional travelers aren't beyond the regime's justice." As Superman strode from the command center, his presence leaving a vacuum of tension, Flash approached Kratos and Thor with something desperate in his eyes. "He's not wrong about everything," the speedster said quietly, quickly, as if afraid to be overheard. "The world is better now in a lot of ways, but it's also—" He stopped, shook his head. "Just listen to both sides. Really listen, because whatever you decide might determine whether we ever find our way back to being heroes instead of—" "Barry?" Diana's voice cut across the confession. "That's enough." Flash vibrated harder, then vanished in a streak of lightning, leaving only the ozone smell of the Speed Force. Diana approached the two gods, her expression unreadable, warrior's discipline masking whatever she truly felt. "The teleporter can send you to the Batcave. Bruce will be expecting you. He monitors all dimensional breaches. Listen to him if you must, but remember what you've seen here. Remember the peace, the order, the lives saved." Her eyes met theirs, and for just an instant they saw doubt flickering in Amazonian depths. "And remember that sometimes warriors must make choices that haunt them forever. The question is whether those choices were worth the price."
Thor and Kratos exchanged glances once more, warriors who had both learned the cost of divine arrogance and the terrible weight of godly power. They had seen Superman's paradise, built on graves and maintained by fear. Now they would hear the other side, see the rebellion that fought for freedom, even if that freedom came with chaos. And then, perhaps, they would decide which fallen hero deserved their loyalty, or if both sides had lost their way in this universe where the line between justice and tyranny had blurred beyond recognition. The Batcave materialized around them in fragments. First, the darkness, absolute and suffocating as a tomb. Then the distant sound of water dripping from stalactites that had witnessed decades of one man's crusade against chaos. The teleporter's hum faded, and Kratos immediately noted the defenses tracking them, automated turrets concealed in shadows, pressure sensors beneath their feet, and the subtle electromagnetic signature of contingency plans layered upon contingency plans. This Batman trusted nothing, feared everything, and prepared for apocalypse as routine. "Impressive," Thor murmured, eyes adjusting to the darkness that would have blinded mortals. "I've seen Asgardian war rooms with less strategic paranoia. This Batman expects betrayal from all quarters." "He's learned to." A voice emerged from shadows deeper than the cave's natural darkness, and Batman stepped into the dim light cast by the Batcomputer's screens. This Bruce Wayne wore the cowl like a burial shroud, his armor scarred from countless battles against former friends, the white eyes of his mask reflecting nothing but grim determination. When your closest ally becomes a dictator, you learn that trust is a luxury you can't afford. Kratos studied the Dark Knight with interest. No powers, no divine heritage, just a human will wrapped in Kevlar and trauma, standing against a god who could vaporize him with a glance. It reminded the Spartan of the most dangerous mortals he'd encountered, those whose refusal to yield exceeded their capacity for survival. "You stand in defiance of Superman," Kratos observed, the Leviathan axe his frost causing his breath to mist. "A man against a god. I have seen this story before. It always ends in the man's death." "Then I'll die," Batman replied flatly, moving to the Batcomputer where surveillance feeds showed the world under Superman's watch. "But I'll die free, and maybe my death will remind people what we've lost, that security without liberty is just another word for prison." His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up files, evidence, the truth Superman's propaganda buried. "This is Superman's peace," Batman stated, his voice carrying decades of exhausted fury. "Clean streets, low crime, perfect order. Did they show you how they maintain it?" The screens erupted with footage Batman's network had captured, scenarios that never made it to official regime records. A peaceful protest in Coast City was broken up by Superman's enforcers, the Man of Steel himself descending like divine judgment to silence dissent. Civilians in Metropolis speak quietly in their homes about missing family members, only to disappear days later. Wonder Woman executes a regime defector who had leaked information to the Insurgency, her sword flashing with ancient Amazon efficiency. Flash vibrating through walls to plant surveillance devices in private residences. Cyborg systems hacked personal communications, flagging subversive language, building files on citizens who expressed doubt. "This is Superman's peace," Batman stated, his voice carrying decades of exhausted fury. "Order maintained through omnipresent fear. He's not protecting people, he's controlling them, deciding who lives, who dies, who gets to speak, who must remain silent." The cowl turned toward them, and behind the white eyes lay something broken but unbowed. "I've fought dictators before. Ra's al Ghul wanted to cleanse the world through mass murder. Darkseid sought to eliminate free will through the anti-life equation. Superman's no different. He just wears a more familiar face." Thor approached the screens, Mjolnir's weight suddenly feeling heavier. He saw echoes of his own past in the footage, when he'd been arrogant and certain, when he'd believed divine right justified any action. I was like this once, so sure of my righteousness that I nearly started a war between Asgard and Jotunheim. My father banished me, stripped my power, taught me humility by making me mortal. His eyes met Batman's. But this Superman, he has no Odin to check his power, no exile to teach him wisdom, only former friends who either joined the regime or oppose him in the shadows. Clark wasn't always like this, Batman said, and for the first time genuine pain cracked through his armor. He was the best of us, the symbol of hope, but grief broke him. The Joker's trick, making him kill Lois, destroy Metropolis, it shattered something fundamental. I tried to reach him, tried to show him that even after unimaginable loss, we don't become the thing we fight. But he couldn't hear it, wouldn't hear it. His fist clenched. He killed the Joker in front of me, punched through his chest like paper. And when I told him it was wrong, that we don't execute even monsters like the Joker, he looked at me like I was insane, asked how many more people had to die before I'd admit my way had failed. Kratos understood that look. He'd worn it himself, when Ares had manipulated him into murdering his family, when rage had consumed everything until only vengeance remained. The Ghost of Sparta had walked Superman's path, had killed gods and toppled pantheons in his fury, and the world had nearly drowned in the consequences. He believes himself righteous, Kratos observed, as I once did. As all tyrants do. They justify atrocity through necessity, claim brutal action serves a greater good. But I learned in Greece's ashes that destroying tyranny through greater tyranny only creates cycles of violence without end. You fight this, Superman, but what do you offer in his place? Return to the chaos he speaks of? The revolving door that let the Joker kill millions? Batman's jaw tightened beneath the cowl. I offer a world where people choose their own destiny, where justice isn't delivered by one man's interpretation of right and wrong, no matter how powerful he is. Yes, the old system was flawed. Yes, villains escaped and killed again. But the solution isn't to become judge, jury, and executioner. It's to fix the system, not abandon it for fascism wrapped in a cape. Noble words, Thor said carefully, but Superman showed us statistics. Crime eliminated, diseases cured, infrastructure rebuilt. The regime, for all its oppression, has achieved results your insurgency cannot match. What victories can you claim beyond surviving in darkness? The question struck deep, and for a moment Batman's shoulders sagged with the weight of years fighting an unwinnable war. When he spoke, his voice carried exhaustion that would have broken lesser men. We've freed political prisoners before Superman could execute them. We've sabotaged surveillance networks so people can still have private thoughts. We've documented the regime's atrocities so that someday, when this nightmare ends, history will remember the truth. He pulled up another file, and this one showed different footage. Insurgency safe houses providing medical care to regime refugees, underground schools teaching children the Bill of Rights, secret printing presses producing banned books. We're keeping the idea of freedom alive, because once people forget what liberty feels like, they'll never fight to reclaim it.
Kratos studied the screens with the tactical eye of a general who had commanded armies against gods. The insurgency's resources were pathetic compared to Superman's regime. They operated from shadows, moved in secret, and relied on hope rather than power. It reminded him of the Spartans before they fell, defiant in the face of impossible odds, choosing death over submission. But he also saw something else. In the faces of those insurgency fighters, in the determination of mortals standing against godly power, Kratos recognized what he'd lost and slowly reclaimed: purpose beyond rage, conviction beyond vengeance. These were people who fought not because they believed they could win, but because submission would cost them their souls. I fought Olympus with rage, Kratos said quietly, "tore down divine order without consideration for what would follow. Greece drowned in the void I created. But these insurgency fighters, they resist not to destroy, but to preserve, to keep something alive that Superman would extinguish in the name of his perfect peace." Batman nodded slowly. Clark sees order as the highest good, but order without freedom is just efficient oppression. The regime runs smoothly because people are too afraid to make waves, too terrified to question, too broken to resist. He turned to face them fully. "I know you've killed gods, Kratos. I know you've led armies, Thor. Your power could tip this war decisively. Join the regime, and Superman becomes truly unstoppable. 3 gods ruling humanity with absolute authority. Join the insurgency, and we might actually have a chance to restore the world to what it should be." "Or we could walk away," Thor countered. "This is not our world, not our war. We owe neither side our loyalty." "There's no walking away," Batman replied grimly. "Superman won't allow powerful unknowns to remain neutral. You've seen what he does to threats, eliminates them before they become problems. The moment you refuse to join him, you become his enemy, and he doesn't tolerate enemies anymore." The truth of it settled over them like Fimbulwinter's chill. They were in the injustice timeline now, where neutrality was impossible and every choice carried apocalyptic weight. Superman offered order maintained through divine tyranny. Batman offered freedom purchased with chaos and blood. Both paths led to suffering. The only question was which suffering they could live with. "Show us more," Kratos demanded. "Both of you have shown us your truths filtered through your perspectives. I would see unvarnished reality. The people living under Superman's order, what do they truly think?" Batman's fingers moved across the keyboard again, pulling up files his network had compiled through tremendous risk, interviews with ordinary citizens conducted in secret, away from Superman's surveillance. Some praised Superman's protection, grateful for streets where they could walk safely, where their children didn't fear random violence. But others spoke in hushed, terrified whispers about neighbors who'd expressed doubt and vanished, about the suffocating weight of living under constant observation, about how hope had curdled into hollow relief that they weren't today's target. "The regime has supporters," Batman admitted. "People who genuinely believe Superman saved the world. They remember the chaos before, the fear that any day could be their last. Clark gave them security, and they've decided that's worth any price." His voice hardened. "But freedom doesn't die dramatically. It dies quietly, in small surrenders, in citizens who've learned to censor their own thoughts because Big Brother is always watching. The regime's greatest victory isn't eliminating crime, it's eliminating the belief that anything besides Superman's will matters." Thor walked to the edge of the platform, staring out into the Batcave's darkness as if seeking answers in the abyss. "When I was banished from Asgard, I learned that power without wisdom is tyranny. But I also learned that rebellion without strategy is suicide. You fight Superman, Batman, but can you actually win? Or are you simply prolonging inevitable defeat?" "I don't know," Batman answered, and the honesty was brutal. "Every day I wake up expecting it to be the last, expecting Superman to finally decide I'm too much trouble and end it. But I keep fighting, because the alternative, bowing to a tyrant who was once my best friend, would kill me more surely than his heat vision ever could." Kratos felt the weight of choice settling on his shoulders like chains forged in Hephaestus's workshop. He understood both sides too well. Superman's rage-driven certainty reminded him of his younger self when killing gods seemed like the only path to peace.
Batman's stubborn defiance echoed his own refusal to kneel before Olympus, even when defiance meant destroying everything. But he'd learned, through Faye's love and Atreus' innocence, through the bitter ashes of Greece and the harsh lessons of the Norse realms, Kratos had learned that power alone solved nothing, that vengeance consumed its vessel. The true strength lay in choosing restraint when annihilation was easier. "We will not decide this moment," Kratos finally declared. "We would walk among the people, see this world through our own eyes, unfiltered by either regime propaganda or insurgency rhetoric. Then we will choose." Batman studied them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but be careful. Superman's surveillance is extensive. If he catches you meeting with insurgency contacts, he'll consider it an act of war. And make no mistake, war with Superman means fighting the most powerful being on this planet, backed by former heroes who've decided his way is the only way." "I have fought the All-Father," Thor replied, Mjolnir sparking with lightning. "I have battled Surtur at the gates of Asgard. Superman's power is great, but I do not fear him." "You should," Batman said quietly, "because the Superman I knew, the one who saved the world 1,000 times, would never have hurt you. But this Superman, the one who rules through fear and calls it justice, he'll kill you without hesitation if he decides you're a threat to his perfect order. And then he'll tell himself it was necessary. That's what makes him dangerous, not his power, but his absolute certainty that he's right." The warning hung in the Batcave's shadows as Kratos and Thor prepared to venture into the Injustice timeline unescorted, to see with their own eyes what two gods in conflict had wrought. Behind them, Batman returned to his monitors, to his endless war against impossible odds, to his refusal to submit, even as submission became the only logical choice. And somewhere above, in the watchtower's cold perfection, Superman watched sensor feeds and calculated outcomes, preparing for the moment when the dimensional travelers would reveal their loyalty, and when he would respond with the absolute force that had become his only language. The storm was building. Thunder and frost and heat vision waited to collide, and the Injustice timeline held its breath, knowing that when gods warred, worlds trembled in the aftermath.
Metropolis gleamed under Superman's rule like a sword fresh from the forge, beautiful, deadly, and perfectly shaped to its master's will. Kratos and Thor walked the streets at street level, having declined both the regime's official escort and Batman's covert surveillance, choosing instead to witness this world's truth through their own divine perception. The Spartan's ashen skin drew stares from citizens who had learned to keep their eyes down, while the Asgardian's armor and bearing marked him as something beyond the metahuman norm the regime had catalogued and controlled. "It's too quiet," Thor observed, his voice low as they passed through a plaza where Superman's statue towered 50 feet high, the bronze man of steel depicted with arms crossed, eyes scanning the horizon for threats or dissent. "I've walked through conquered cities before. This has that same silence, not peace, but the held breath before violence." Kratos nodded, his warrior's instincts reading the body language of the crowd. People moved efficiently, purposefully, but without joy. They smiled when regime patrols passed, offered cheerful greetings to Superman's enforcers, and maintained the performance of contentment. But their eyes told different stories. The glances over shoulders, the careful word choices, the way conversations died when strangers approached. This was fear masquerading as order. A child's laughter cut through the tension, and both gods turned to see a small girl breaking from her mother's grip, running toward a fountain with the innocent abandon that tyranny hadn't yet crushed. The mother's face went white with terror, not of the child's safety, but of drawing attention. Her eyes darted to a nearby patrol, calculating whether this moment of uncontrolled joy would be logged, analyzed, or used against them later. "Emma, come here," the mother hissed, forced calm cracking at the edges. "Remember what we talked about, proper behavior in public." The little girl's smile faltered, confusion clouding her features as she was pulled back, the spontaneous joy dying under the weight of surveillance state conditioning. And Kratos felt something ancient and terrible stir in his chest, the same fury that had driven him against the gods of Olympus, watching divine authority crush the humanity from mortals who deserved better. "This is what Superman calls peace," the Spartan growled, frost spreading from the Leviathan axe at his back. "Children taught to fear joy. Parents are terrified of their offspring's innocence drawing the wrong attention. I have seen this in Sparta, in the brutal efficiency of warrior culture that forgot why warriors exist, to protect, not to dominate." Before Thor could respond, the air pressure changed. Not Superman this time, but something equally dangerous. Wonder Woman descended with several Amazonian warriors Diana had recruited to the regime's cause, their armor bearing the S-shield like a brand of servitude to divine authority. The princess stopped before them, hand resting on her sword hilt, warrior's assessment in her eyes. "You're being followed," Diana stated without preamble. "Insurgency operatives, 3 blocks back. They're planning to make contact, probably to recruit you or eliminate you as a regime asset." Her eyes narrowed. "What's your answer going to be when they ask you to betray Superman?" "We betray no one," Thor replied, Mjolnir held loosely but ready. "We observe, we consider, we choose freely, as all beings should have the right to do. Or is free choice now a crime under Superman's perfect order?" Diana's jaw tightened. Free choice is how the Joker chose to nuke Metropolis, how Gotham's villains chose to murder thousands, how the world chose chaos over security time and again until Clark finally imposed the discipline necessary for civilization to survive. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You think this is oppression? I've watched my mother lead Themyscira for thousands of years. Sometimes warriors must rule. Sometimes the strong must guide the weak. That's not tyranny. It's responsibility." "Themyscira," Kratos said softly, and there was something dangerous in his tone. "An island isolated from the world, where gods and warriors made all decisions. Tell me, princess, did the mortals of man's world ask for your guidance? Did they choose Superman's rule, or was it imposed by gods who decided they knew better?" The challenge hung between them like a drawn blade. Diana's hand tightened on her sword, and for a moment violence trembled in the air. Amazonian steel against Leviathan ice, divine authority against God-killer's defiance. The civilians in the plaza fled, recognizing the prelude to combat between beings who could level cities. Then Flash arrived in a streak of red lightning, vibrating between them with desperate energy. Whoa, everyone, calm down. Diana, Superman sent me to check in, not start a war. And you two," my eyes, older than they should be, pleaded with them. "Please, don't make this harder. Just tell us you're with the regime, or at least not against us, and we can all walk away." "Why does it matter so much?" Thor asked, genuine curiosity in his voice.
Why do you fear our neutrality more than our opposition? The speedster's vibration increased, molecules dancing with anxious energy. Because neutral means unpredictable, and Superman, he's not the man he was. He doesn't do unpredictable anymore. Everything has to be controlled, categorized, and understood. If you're not with him, you're a variable, and he eliminates variables. The speedster's voice dropped to a whisper. Please, I don't want to watch him kill 2 more heroes who might have been friends in another life. The admission hung in the air like prophecy. This Flash, who had once been optimism incarnate, now lived in constant fear of his closest ally. The Speed Force crackled around him, not with joy, but with the nervous energy of someone always ready to run, always expecting betrayal, always one mistake away from becoming Superman's target. Kratos saw it clearly now. The regime's true foundation, not Superman's power, though that was formidable, but fear. Fear kept Wonder Woman justifying the atrocity as a necessity. Fear made Flash remain despite his doubts. Fear that transformed heroes into enforcers and friends into jailers. The same fear that had made the Greek gods tyrants, that had corrupted Olympus from within. That always, always destroys divine authority from the foundations up. We have seen enough, Kratos declared. Diana, tell your Superman that we will meet him tonight in neutral ground, and we will give him our answer. Wonder Woman studied them both, warrior's instinct reading body language, preparing for betrayal. Where? The ruins of the Hall of Justice, where heroes once gathered as equals before godhood corrupted the dream. We will meet there at sunset. Come alone, Superman, or admit that you fear those who will not automatically kneel. It was masterfully done, a challenge framed as an invitation, bait that Superman's pride would never let him refuse. Diana's eyes flashed with anger at the manipulation, but she nodded slowly. He'll be there, but if this is an ambush, if Batman's put you up to this, the Dark Knight knows nothing of our decision. This choice is ours alone, as all choices should be.
As Diana and her Amazons departed, Flash lingered a moment longer. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I hope you choose right. Because I'm tired, so tired of being afraid of my best friend, tired of running from what we've become. Then he vanished, leaving only the ozone smell of the Speed Force and the weight of confession hanging in the air. The shadows deepened as afternoon stretched toward evening, and Batman's Insurgency operatives finally made their approach. Not the clumsy attempt Diana had warned of, but a subtle contact. A civilian pressing a note into Thor's hand before disappearing into the crowd. The Thunderer unfolded it, reading the brief message. Bruce knows what you're planning. The Hall of Justice is a trap. Superman will have reinforcements. We can provide support. Choose freedom. He doesn't understand, Kratos said, reading over Thor's shoulder. We're not choosing sides. We're forcing the choice on Superman. Thor's eyes crackled with lightning, the storm building as the sun descended toward the horizon. We're going to make him reveal what he truly is, whether any part of the hero remains, or if the tyrant has consumed everything. And then we will do what must be done, Kratos finished grimly, as we have always done. Gods who forget their purpose must be reminded, or replaced. They made their way to the ruins of the Hall of Justice as twilight painted Metropolis in shades of blood and shadow. The building stood as a monument to failure, the round table where the Justice League had once deliberated as equals, now cracked and dust-covered. The symbols of heroes who'd stood for truth and justice, tarnished by the reality of what they'd become. This was where it had to happen. where Superman would be confronted not with insurgency terrorism or diplomatic maneuvering, but with the simple truth delivered by those who understood godhood's burden. Superman arrived as the last light died, cape billowing in winds that obeyed his presence. But he wasn't alone. Wonder Woman flanked him, sword drawn. Cyborg materialized through the boom tube, weapon systems primed. Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, his will bent to Superman's certainty, created constructs that glowed with emerald threat. And behind them, ranks of regime soldiers with Kryptonian weapons, motherbox technology, armor designed to fight metahuman threats. "You asked for neutral ground," Superman said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a god who no longer questions his righteousness. "But there's no neutral ground anymore, not in this world, not for those with the power to reshape reality." His eyes glowed faintly red, heat vision dancing behind the irises. "So tell me your choice. Stand with order or stand with chaos. Help me build a world where no one suffers the loss I did, or oppose me and be removed as a threat to global stability." Kratos stepped forward, the Leviathan axe appearing in his hand, frost spreading across the ruined floor. "You offer false choice, Kryptonian. Order or chaos, as if nothing exists between extremes. But I have lived both. I was Sparta's weapon, bringing order through brutal efficiency. Then I became chaos incarnate, destroying Olympus in my rage. Both paths led to ash and blood and the corpses of innocents caught in divine conflict." Thor raised Mjolnir, lightning arcing between hammer and storm clouds gathering overhead. "You speak of preventing suffering through absolute control, but I've learned that such control is an illusion. People suffer under tyranny, just as they suffer in chaos. The only difference is whether they're crushed by disorder's randomness or order's deliberate cruelty." Superman's expression hardened. "I gave you a chance to choose the right side. Instead, you lecture me like I'm some tyrant who enjoys power. I hate what I've become. Hate that I have to rule instead of inspire. But someone has to make the hard choices. Someone has to do what's necessary, even when it costs them everything they once believed." His voice broke slightly. "Even when it costs them their soul." "Then let us relieve you of that burden," Kratos said quietly, and there was something almost compassionate in his tone. One broken god recognizing another. "You have lost your way, Superman, as I lost mine, as Thor lost his. The difference is we had those who loved us enough to stop us, to show us what we'd become before we destroyed everything. But you killed those who might have saved you, executed the Joker and called it justice, silenced dissent and called it peace, became the very thing you swore to prevent. You know nothing about what I've lost." Superman's voice cracked like thunder, the building shaking with barely contained power. "Nothing about watching helplessly as the woman you love dies by your own hand, about holding your unborn child's corpse and knowing you were the weapon, about begging Batman to help you end the monster responsible, only to be told that even after 11 million deaths, we don't kill." He rose into the air, godhood manifest, eyes blazing with heat that could melt mountains. "Then I won't let you destroy what I've built, won't let the world slip back to chaos. If you stand against the regime, you're terrorists, threats to global stability, and I eliminate threats." "Then eliminate us," Kratos challenged, Spartan rage beginning to burn beneath ashen skin. "If you can." The moment shattered like glass. Superman moved first, faster than thought, heat vision lancing towards Kratos with enough force to vaporize steel, but the Spartan was already moving, Leviathan axe spinning to intercept, ice meeting heat in an explosion of steam and frost. Thor launched skyward, Mjolnir screaming through the air towards Superman's skull with the force of Asgardian thunder. Wonder Woman intercepted, her sword catching Mjolnir with a ringing clang that shook the foundations of reality.
Amazon strength meeting Asgardian might. "You made the wrong choice," she hissed, divine warrior fury in her eyes. "No," Thor replied, lightning arcing from his body in cascading waves. "We made the only choice that matters, the one where gods remember they serve mortals, not rule them." And the Hall of Justice, monument to fallen idealism, became the arena where godhood itself would be tested, where Superman's regime and two gods from broken worlds would clash with the future of the injustice timeline hanging in the balance.
The Hall of Justice erupted into divine warfare, powers that could reshape continents unleashed in the confined space where heroes once debated as equals. Superman's heat vision carved molten furrows through ancient stone as Kratos rolled beneath the blast, the Leviathan axe leaving trails of frost in the superheated air. Thor's lightning met Wonder Woman's God-killer sword in cascades of sparks that ignited the oxygen itself, each clash between Asgardian and Amazon shaking the building's foundations with the fury of mythologies colliding. "You could have joined us," Superman roared, moving with speed that broke sound barriers, fists hammering into Kratos with enough force to pulverize lesser beings. But the Ghost of Sparta had weathered blows from Zeus himself, had endured the Titan's wrath, and Superman's rage, for all its terrible power, was merely one more god's fury to survive. The Spartan's fist caught Superman's jaw mid-strike, Spartan strength enhanced by divine heritage meeting Kryptonian invulnerability, and for the first time in years, Superman tasted blood. "I have joined causes before," Kratos grunted, driving his knee into Superman's ribs with bone-cracking force. "Served gods who claimed righteousness. It always ends the same. Power corrupting purpose until only tyranny remains." He caught Superman's return blow on the Leviathan axe, ice spreading across Kryptonian skin. "You are no different than Zeus, no wiser than Odin, just another god who forgot that power without accountability is simply violence with a prettier name." Superman's eyes blazed nova bright, heat vision at full intensity, carving through the hall's roof, bringing tons of rubble crashing down. But Kratos had fought in collapsing temples before, had survived Olympus's destruction, and rubble was merely terrain. The Spartan surged forward through falling stone, blades of chaos materializing in his grip, hellfire wrapping around Superman's throat as he drove the Kryptonian into the floor hard enough to crater the foundations. Across the ruined chamber, Thor and Wonder Woman traded blows that would have annihilated armies. The Amazon's sword, forged by Hephaestus himself and blessed with the power to kill gods, rang against Mjolnir with each strike, divine craftsmanship testing Asgardian enchantment. Diana fought with the precision of centuries spent perfecting the warrior's art, every movement economical and lethal, her strikes seeking the gaps in Thor's defense with surgical accuracy. "You side with terrorists," Diana shouted, her blade carving a line of crimson across Thor's cheek. "With chaos merchants who would rather watch the world burn than accept necessary order." "I side with free will," Thor countered, Mjolnir's strike sending Diana crashing through 3 support columns. Lightning arced from his hands, forcing the Amazon to dodge, to defend, to acknowledge that the Asgardian's power matched her own. "I learned on Midgard that mortals have the right to choose their own destiny, even if their choices lead to suffering. Your Superman has stolen that right, wrapped his theft in the language of protection, and called it heroism." Green Lantern's constructs, massive emerald fists empowered by Hal Jordan's iron will, bent to Superman's certainty, hammered into Thor from behind. The Thunderer went down, constructs pinning him, and for a moment Hal's face showed through the regime soldier's mask. "I'm sorry," the pilot whispered, "but Clark's right. We tried it your way for years. Democracy, justice, second chances, and millions died. This is the only way that works."
Thor's eyes blazed with lightning that sundered armies since the 9 realms were young. Then you've forgotten what you fight for, Lantern. The ring chose you for your will, but a will without wisdom is just stubbornness, without compassion, just cruelty. Mjolnir answered his call, tearing through constructs like tissue paper, and the hammer's strike sent Green Lantern spiraling into the darkness. I was like you once, so certain, so arrogant. It took losing everything to teach me that being right matters less than doing right. Cyborg materialized through another boom tube, his systems fully integrated with Motherbox technology that made him half-new god. Energy cannons that could breach Apocalypse armor charged with lethal intent, targeting Thor's exposed back. But before Victor could fire, the Leviathan axe screamed through the air, frost coating Cyborg's systems, freezing lubricants and disrupting power flow. Kratos had thrown blindly, trusting warrior instinct, and the god of war's aim never missed. "Your technology will not save you," the Spartan stated coldly, recalling the axe to his hand through sheer will. "I have destroyed machines blessed by Hephaestus, shattered automatons crafted by the greatest smiths of Olympus. Your Motherbox, impressive as it is merely one more tool that thinks itself superior to the hand that wields it." Superman erupted from the crater, cape shredded, armor cracked, but Kryptonian biology already healing the damage. His face carried the terrible beauty of divine wrath unleashed without restraint, the last vestiges of Clark Kent's humanity buried beneath the god's terrible certainty. "You don't understand what you're protecting. Batman's world, the one you're fighting for, it's built on corpses, on the graves of people who died because we pulled our punches, because we gave monsters second chances, because we believed in redemption for the irredeemable. And your world?" Kratos drove forward, meeting Superman mid-charge, god against god in a raw contest of strength. The impact sent shockwaves rippling across Metropolis, windows shattering for miles, the ground buckling beneath their feet. Your fist caught my jaw, the impact thunderous, but the Spartan only grinned, a terrible expression on the Ghost of Sparta's face. "Yes, hit harder, God King. Show me the rage beneath the righteousness. Prove that you're just another tyrant wearing a hero's skin." "I'm not a tyrant," Superman's voice cracked, and for an instant the mask slipped. Beneath the absolute authority, beneath the regime's perfect order, Clark Kent still existed, broken, grieving, desperately trying to justify the monster he'd become. "I'm trying to save people, to prevent anyone from suffering what I suffered, to make sure no one else has to hold their dead wife and know they were the weapon that killed her." The confession hung in the ruins like a prayer or a curse, and for just a moment the violence paused. Wonder Woman lowered her sword fractionally. Flash, watching from the shadows where he'd been waiting for orders, felt something break in his chest. Even Cyborg's targeting systems hesitated, some remnant of Victor Stone's humanity surfacing through regime conditioning. Thor landed beside Kratos, both gods battered but unbowed, and the Thunderer's voice carried the weight of someone who'd walked Superman's path and found redemption on the other side. "We know your pain, Kal-El of Krypton. Kratos murdered his own family, manipulated by a god's cruelty. I nearly destroyed Jotunheim in my arrogance and would have started a war that could have consumed the 9 realms. We've both stood where you stand now, at the precipice where grief becomes rage, where rage becomes tyranny, where tyranny calls itself justice. But we stepped back," Kratos added quietly, and there was something almost gentle in his tone, the compassion of one broken god offering salvation to another. "You speak of preventing suffering, Superman, but all you've done is spread your suffering across an entire planet, made everyone else carry the weight of your grief through their fear." Superman's hands clenched, trembling with barely contained power. What would you have me do? Step down? Let Batman's chaos return? Watch people die who could have been saved if I just maintained order? His voice dropped to a whisper. I can't. I've come too far, sacrificed too much. If I admit I was wrong, then Lois died for nothing. Metropolis burned for nothing. Every person I've executed, every freedom I've curtailed, it all becomes meaningless if I stop now. No, Thor said firmly. It becomes meaningful the moment you choose to stop, the moment you admit that power without consent is tyranny, regardless of intention, the moment you trust humanity to choose its own path, even knowing they might choose poorly. He lowered Mjolnir, a gesture of peace from Asgard's prince. You cannot undo what you've done, Clark, but you can prevent worse. You can step down before your regime becomes so entrenched that removing it requires bloodshed on scales that make Metropolis's destruction seem merciful.
For a long moment, Superman hung suspended between earth and sky, between the hero he'd been and the tyrant he'd become. Behind him, his regime watched with expressions ranging from Diana's warrior certainty to Flash's desperate hope to Cyborg's cold calculation. And in that moment, the future of the Injustice timeline balanced on a knife's edge, one God's choice determining whether redemption remained possible or whether only violence could end this cycle of divine authority gone wrong. Then Batman's voice cut through the tension, the Dark Knight emerging from shadows with the Insurgency at his back. Green Arrow, Black Canary, Harley Quinn reformed after the Joker's death, and dozens of others who'd refused to kneel. It's over, Clark. Stand down and we'll find a way forward. Keep fighting, and these two gods will do what I've never had the power to do, stop you permanently. Superman's jaw tightened, pride, grief, and terrible certainty warring across his face. Bruce, of course you're here, always in the shadows, always judging, always so certain your way is right. The heat vision flared. You're willing to let these dimensional refugees kill me after everything we've been through, after years of fighting side by side? I'm willing to let them do what I should have done years ago, Batman replied, and there was unbearable pain beneath the cowl's blank expression. Stop my best friend from becoming the monster he spent his life fighting. I failed you, Clark, didn't see the warning signs, didn't pull you back from the edge when I might have saved you, but I won't fail the world by letting you continue this. The words struck deeper than any blow. Superman's invulnerability meant nothing against the truth delivered by the only person whose opinion he'd ever truly valued. And for the first time since Metropolis burned, doubt flickered across the Man of Steel's face. I've killed for this, Superman said hollowly, murdered people in the name of order, executed prisoners, silenced dissent, ruled through fear. If I step down now, what was it all for? How do I face Lois's memory knowing I became a tyrant in her name? You face her memory by stopping before you become something she would have despised, Kratos answered, and the Ghost of Sparta spoke from brutal experience. I destroyed Greece in my daughter's name, convinced myself that vengeance would honor Calliope's death, but in the end, I learned that the dead do not want monuments built from corpses. They want the living to be better than their killers, to break cycles of violence rather than perpetuate them. Superman's eyes closed, and for a moment he looked almost human again, just a man in a cape, carrying a burden too heavy for any shoulders, even invulnerable ones. The Hall of Justice held its breath, heroes and insurgents alike waiting to see whether redemption was possible, or whether only Godslayer's justice would end the regime's reign. When Superman's eyes opened, something had changed. The absolute certainty had cracked, grief and exhaustion bleeding through. I don't know how to stop, Superman admitted, voice breaking. Don't know who I am without the regime, without the mission.
I've been the world's protector for so long, first through inspiration, now through control. What's left if I'm neither? Clark Kent, Batman said quietly, stepping forward despite Wonder Woman's warning growl. Smallville farm boy, journalist, friend, the man who taught me that symbols matter, that hope means something, that even in Gotham's darkness, light could prevail. That man still exists, Clark, buried beneath the tyrant, beneath the regime, beneath all the justifications, but he's still there. You just have to let him surface again. Thor extended his hand, Mjolnir resting on his shoulder. In Asgard, we believe that redemption is always possible for those brave enough to seek it. You've made terrible choices, Superman, become something your younger self would have fought against, but the path back begins with a single step, admitting you've lost your way and asking for help to find it again. Superman looked at the offered hand, then at Batman's outstretched palm, then at Kratos' steady gaze. The Ghost of Sparta nodded once, recognition passing between gods who had both walked through darkness and emerged changed. This was the moment, the choice that would define not just Superman's fate, but the injustice timeline's future. Slowly, Superman descended. His feet touched the ruined floor of the Hall of Justice, and for the first time in years, he stood among others rather than above them. "I'll step down," Superman said hoarsely, "dismantle the regime, face trial for what I've done. But I need help, need people to prevent the chaos that will follow, to keep the world from sliding back into the disorder that created me." "We'll help," Batman promised, "not by maintaining your systems, but by building something better, something that learns from both our failures, your tyranny and my insufficient methods. A world where justice has teeth but doesn't devour freedom, where safety doesn't require submission." Wonder Woman moved as if to protest, but Superman raised a hand, stopping her. "Diana, I've been wrong. About all of it. The regime was never about protecting people. It was about controlling my pain by controlling everything else. I see that now, and I can't keep being the monster I swore to fight." The Amazon warrior stood frozen, centuries of combat experience failing to prepare her for this moment. Then, slowly, painfully, she sheathed her sword. "If you choose redemption, my friend, then I will follow, as I should have followed when you first suggested execution over justice. The warrior in me understood your pain, but the hero I swore to be should have reminded you that we're supposed to be better." Flash vibrated into view, and tears streaked his mask. Thank God, Clark. I thought—" He couldn't finish, couldn't articulate the relief of finally being released from the fear that had defined his existence since the regime began. Kratos placed a heavy hand on Superman's shoulder, the gesture carrying the weight of understanding only those who'd walked similar paths could share. "The road back will be harder than the path that brought you here. People will not forgive easily. Some never will. But redemption is not about absolution. It's about choosing to be better than you were, even knowing you can never undo what you've done." "I know," Superman said quietly. "I've known for a long time, just didn't have the strength to admit it, to face what I'd become." He looked at Thor, at Kratos, at Batman. "Thank you for being strong enough to stop me when I couldn't stop myself." Thor smiled, and it carried the warmth of Asgard's sun. "That's what heroes do, Clark Kent. We catch each other when we fall, remind each other what we fight for, and when necessary, we stand between our friends and their worst impulses. You would have done the same for any of us." "Maybe," Superman replied. "Once. I hope I can be that person again." Batman stepped forward, and for the first time in years, Bruce Wayne embraced Clark Kent. "You will be. It'll take time, trust, proving through actions that you've changed, but we'll help, all of us, because that's what the Justice League was supposed to be. Not gods ruling from above, but heroes standing together, learning from each other, being better together than we could be alone. As the sun rose over Metropolis, casting light into the ruins of the Hall of Justice, the Injustice timeline began its slow, painful transformation. The Superman regime would be dismantled, political prisoners freed, surveillance systems destroyed. The Kryptonian would face trial for his crimes, accepting punishment as the first step toward redemption. It wouldn't be easy. Casualties would follow as the order collapsed and had to be rebuilt more carefully. But for the first time since the Joker's final trick, hope, real hope, not the enforced optimism of a police state, had returned to Earth. Kratos and Thor stood apart from the reunions, watching gods and mortals begin the work of healing. The rift that had pulled them to this universe pulsed nearby, dimensional energies finally stabilizing enough for return passage. "We should go," Thor said quietly. "Our own worlds need us. Asgard's survivors require a king who has learned wisdom. Your boy, Atreus, grows without his father's guidance." Yes, Kratos agreed, but he lingered a moment longer, watching Superman kneel before Batman, before the Insurgency, before the people he'd ruled, accepting accountability, beginning the long road back from tyranny towards heroism. This was necessary to show this world that gods can be challenged, can be stopped, can be redeemed if they choose it. "Do you think he'll make it?" Thor asked. "Can someone who's fallen so—"
The Injustice timeline would never forget the day two gods from dying worlds challenged its greatest protector-turned-tyrant and gave him the gift of accountability. Superman's trial would last months, the dismantling of the regime would take years, and rebuilding trust would span generations. But the work had begun, sparked by Kratos and Thor's refusal to accept false choices between order and chaos, tyranny and anarchy. In the ruins of the Hall of Justice, now being rebuilt as a symbol of justice restored rather than abandoned, a new monument rose, not to Superman's regime or Batman's insurgency, but to the principle that gods who rule without consent must be challenged, can be stopped, and, with courage and help, might find redemption. The plaque read simply, "Even gods can fall, even tyrants can change, even the darkest nights can yield to dawn. Hope shines brightest when it costs us everything to maintain it." Batman stood before it with Superman at his side, no longer God King and insurgent leader, but simply two men trying to rebuild what their conflict had destroyed. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, marked by the consequences of choices that could never be undone. But they would walk it together, hero and fallen hero, learning again what they'd forgotten in the ashes of Metropolis and the paranoia of Gotham's shadows. Those symbols only matter if those who bear them remain worthy of the ideals they represent. That power without restraint corrupts absolutely. That freedom, for all its chaos and cost, remains humanity's most precious gift. And that sometimes the greatest act of heroism is admitting you've become the villain and finding the strength to change. The Injustice timeline had been given a second chance, purchased by two gods who understood tyranny's price because they'd paid it themselves. What would be built from these ashes remained uncertain, but for the first time in years, the world breathed freely, hoped genuinely, and remembered what it felt like to choose its own destiny. The Ghost of Sparta and the God of Thunder had moved on to their own battles, their own redemptions, their own worlds that needed gods who remembered their purpose. But their impact endured in the timeline they'd saved. not through conquest or rule, but through the simple act of showing Superman what he'd become and offering him the path back. Justice, it turned out, wasn't about perfect order or absolute freedom. It was about the constant struggle between the two, the eternal vigilance required to prevent power from corrupting those who wielded it, and the courage to challenge gods when they forgot they served rather than ruled. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night. More stories await.